as I, Leo Graves, taxidermist, watched. The oak tree, as elevator door scraped rough as a cat, as tongue against my face and started to scream. I jerked back, the sound a wet, grinding shriek that vibrated up my spine. The drain cover before me wasn't oak, it was gnarled. Wet metal, cold and slick with condensation, scraping against my cheek like a cat. It screamed as it slid open. A high-pitched metallic shriek that made my teeth ache, steam rising in a thin, whispering plume. Lee, my childhood name, spoken in the hiss of escaping vapor. The sound wasn't he just heard. It was felt in the hollows of my bones, a vibration against my skin. The cat leapt onto the cover, a shadow-given form. Its fur was midnight navy, absorbing the weak light, but its heart pulsed visibly on a thin silver cord attached to its chest, beating with a slow, wet thump. Thump, 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 thump. Asterisk, each beat echoed the rhythm of the drain, a gurgle beneath. Its tail flicked, a sharp, precise motion, and a porcelain tooth tumbled from the drain, as edge I snatched it mid. It was cold, sharp, and chattered against my palm like frozen shrimp shells. The sound a dry, relentless tearing like paper being ripped apart over and over. Tear, 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 asterisk I held it up. The steam rising from the drain coalesced, writing words on the wall. Food, you are not alone. Asterisk I turned towards the shallow puddle, reflecting the low, blinding sunlight filtering down the drain shaft. My reflection stared back. Same wide, terrified eyes, but the mouth was wrong, too wide, too slack, the lips moving silently. Same eyes, different mouth. Asterisk the cat's heart cord snapped, with a sound like a brittle twig breaking. The cord went slack. The external heart still beating, a tiny frantic drum against the cold metal. I looked up, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The shadow wasn't just darkness. It was 3D, jagged edges cutting through the steam, solidifying into a shape that fully reached for the drain cover. It touched the metal with a sound like rusted hinges grinding, and then it grabbed at my wrist. Not a shadow. As touch, it was cold, heavy, physical. Rusty metal teeth, invisible until now, bit into my skin where the shadow-esque fingers pressed. A sharp, coppery taste flooded my mouth. I fought, yanking my arm back, but the shadow held firm, its grip cold and unyielding, pulling me towards the drain. The porcelain teeth in my hand chattered faster. The tearing sound merging with the drain is gurgle, thump, 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 thump. Asterisk the cat watched, its head tilted, the external heart pulsing steadily. Its eyes held no fear. Only a terrible, ancient curiosity. The shadow-esque fingers dripped rust onto my wrist. Thick, dark droplets that smelled of old blood and wet iron staining my skin. The blinding sunlight above seemed to sharpen the air, revealing impossible geometric lines in the steam, like the skeleton of a building made of light. I could see the words in the steam. Finmother is waiting. Asterisk the words weren't T-written. They were Sue, the do-chef. And the steam, as real as the rust on my skin. My defiance flared, hot and stupid. Get off me, I spat. The words harsh against the tearing sound of the teeth. I pulled harder, muscles straining, the rust biting deeper. The shadow didn't flinch. It leaned in, its jagged form pressing closer, the weight of it pressing down on my chest like a stone. The drain gurgle deepened, merging with the sound of the porcelain teeth. Tear, tear, tear! Asterisk the cat, as tail flicked again, a silent signal. I felt a sudden sharp suds behind my left ear, like a memory being plucked away. The thief, asterisk the shadow's fingers tightened, the rust dripping steadily. Its jagged form tilted, and I heard it whisper, not with sound, but with the cold weight pressing against my skull, the words forming directly in the marrow of my bones, as clear and terrible as the porcelain teeth chattering against my palm. Fufalin asterisk, my mother's name. The shadow-esque whisper was the sound of 1,000 rusted nails being drawn from wood, the smell of wet iron, the taste of copper. It wasn't her name. It was a key turning in a lock deep inside my skull. The drain as whisper, the cat's heart, the shadow as grip, the teeth as tearing, all converged into that single, impossible word. Thivelin? Asterisk the light above seemed to fracture, revealing the hidden geometry of the air, sharp and cold. The shadow, as fingers dripped rust onto my wrist, the name burning into my skin. The door swung inward on rusted hinges, that groaned like a drowning man's last breath, and I stumbled into the studio, my boots splashing through something warm and thick coffee, maybe, or worse. The air hit me first, a sour tang of burnt grounds, the acrid bite of steam clinging to the back of my throat, the wet, papery scent of something torn unfolding. My fingers twitched toward the porcelain teeth still clutched in my palm, their chatter a high, keening wail that made my teeth ache. I dropped them. They hit the concrete floor with a sharp clack, and the sound ricocheted off the walls like gunfire. The mirror was gone. Not shattered. Unmade. The glass was there, still, but the reflection wasn't. Instead, fragments of tiny clung to the edges like cobwebs, each shard holding a face that wasn't mine. My face. Wide, slack, the mouth too big, the eyes too dark, the skin stretched thin over something funrung beneath. Lee. The words slithered across the glass in steam, not written but tufty breathing, the letters curling like smoke from a dying ember. My hands flew to my cheeks. No, but the glass was cold, smooth, and when I pressed my fingers against it, the reflection fooched, the mouth stretching wider, the lips peeling back in a grin that wasn't mine. The cat was already moving. Midnight navy fur rippled as it slinked across the floor, its external heart pulsing in time with the grinding coffee beans it dragged behind it. Grind! The sound wasn't just heard. It was soon felt, a vibration in my bones, the wet parchment-tearing sound of old pages being fed into a machine, the scent of bitter espresso mixing with the copper tang of blood. The cat's tail flicked, a sharp, deliberate motion, and the porcelain teeth on the floor screamed, the chatter rising into a crescendo, the words fully lost, on hammering into my skull like nails. I fell to my knees, the cold concrete biting through my jeans, and the cat's eyes locked onto mine. Black, endless, knowing. It didn't blink, it didn't breathe, it just watched. My mother's laugh dissolved in my mind like sugar in rain. 1 second, it was there. The sound of her voice, the warmth of her touch, the way she'd tilt her head when she smiled. The next, it was sweet gone, replaced by a hollow echo, a silence so deep it hurt. The cat's tail flicked again, and the shadow behind me moved. I didn't see it, felt it, a cold weight pressing against my spine, the scent of rust and old blood, the sound of something tweeny unfolding, like a map from a rolled-up scroll. The mirror shards trembled. The reflections soon twisted, the faces stretching, the mouths opening wider, until they screamed soundlessly, the steam curling into words that weren't words but twin shapes seemed jagged and hungry. Lee. Not a touch into invasion. The shards broke further, not from impact but from twinty pressure, the glass bending inward like water, the reflections reaching for me. Each one whispered my name, a chorus of voices that weren't voices but screams we pressed into the air. I scrambled back, my fingers digging into the concrete, the taste of copper flooding my mouth, the sound of grinding beans mixing with the chatter of the teeth, the wet parchment tearing sound of my own breath. The cat's heart beat faster. Thump. The sound wasn't just heard. It was I felt a pulse against my ribs, a rhythm that matched the shadow's slow, deliberate advance. The fingers surfaced through the mirror, not breaking the glass, but slipping through it like smoke, the rust staining the surface in thick, dark veins. One finger hovered over my cheek. I didn't flinch, couldn't. The cold weight of it pressed against my skin, the texture like wet sandpaper, the scent of iron and something twinny older, something that smelled like the inside of a coffin. The finger shoody, not a touch, a mark. The rust seeped into my skin, dark and wet. The texture like melted tar, the scent like the first breath of a corpse. My hand flew to my face, my fingers coming away stained, the cold weight of the shadow's presence pressing against my skull, the words Fauvelin burning into my mind like a brand. The cat's tail flicked again, and the porcelain teeth screamed, the chatter rising into a shriek that split the air, the sound of wet parchment tearing over and over, the mirror shards cracking further, the reflections peeling away like skin. The shadow's finger moved. It didn't touch me. It drew a line down my cheek, the rust staining my skin in a jagged, uneven path, the cold weight of it pressing against my bones, the words "When Mother is waiting," written in the steam, not in letters, but in shapes, jagged and hungry, the air itself bending around them. I screamed, not with sound, with shoyancy. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms, the taste of copper and rust flooding my mouth, the shadow's presence pressing against my skull, the cat's heart beating faster, the porcelain teeth chattering like mad, the mirror shattered, not all at once. Piece by piece, the glass breaking inward, the reflections van peeling away, the faces van melting into the steam, the words swilly, Lee, echoing in the silence. The shadow's fingers, sooty pressed against my cheek, the rust staining my skin, the cold weight of it pressing against my bones, the words Hundevelin burning into my mind like a brand. I didn't see the cat move. I felt it. The cold weight of its presence pressing against my back, the scent of its fur, the sound of its heart beating, the wet parchment, tearing sound of its tail flicking against my shoulder. The porcelain teeth screamed, the chatter rising into a shriek that split the air, the shadow's fingers pressing harder against my cheek, the rust staining my skin, the cold weight of it pressing against my bones, the words "Fit Mother" is waiting in the steam. Not in letters, but in shapes jagged and hungry, the air itself to feed them ding around them. The shadow's finger fufi moved it didn't touch me. It drew another line down my cheek, the rust staining my skin in a jagged, uneven path, the cold weight of it pressing against my bones, the words Hunflin burning into my mind like a brand. The cat's tail flicked again, and the porcelain teeth screamed, the chatter rising into a shriek that split the air, the mirror shards cracking further, the reflections foothiling away like skin. The shadow's finger pressed against my cheek. The rust seeped into my skin, dark and wet, the texture like melted tar, the scent like the first breath of a corpse. I didn't flinch. Couldn't. The cold weight of it pressed against my skin, the texture like wet sandpaper, the scent of iron and something fonder, something that smelled like the inside of a coffin. The finger moved Dev. It didn't touch me. It drew a line down my cheek, the rust staining my skin in a jagged, uneven path. The cold weight of it pressing against my bones, the words Fufflin burning into my mind like a brand. The cat's tail flicked again, and the porcelain teeth screamed, the chatter rising into a shriek that split the air, the mirror shards cracking further the reflections peeling away like skin. The shadow's finger sorty pressed, I pray. The rust seeped into my skin, dark and wet, the texture like melted tar, the scent like the first breath of a corpse. I didn't flinch. Couldn't. The cold weight of it pressed against my skin, the texture like wet sandpaper, the scent of iron and something fonder, something that smelled like the inside of a coffin. The finger moved, and then it poked through a shard. The glass didn't break. It bent. The shard twisted, the rusted metal teeth of the shadow's finger slipping through like a blade through butter, the cold weight of it pressing against my cheek, the wet stain spreading like ink in water, the words Evelyn burning into my mind like a brand, the finger softened touched my skin, and then it toughened, left a mark. The sunlight was a physical assault. Not warm, not comforting, a blinding clinical white that scraped against my retinas, revealing angles where there shouldn't be any. The air itself seemed to fracture, shimmering with a geometry that wasn't natural, wasn't right. My boots scraped against the concrete as I scrambled toward the storm drain, the metallic tang of fear coating my tongue. I kicked something toindy, a rusted pipe, I think Torquay, and felt a sickening 40. As it fused with the steel of my boot, the metal melding together with a disturbing ease. It wasn't a clean break, it was a forejoining, a violation of material integrity. The cat's heart pulsed against my back, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. Thump, 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 thump. It was faster than it should be, a frantic rhythm mirroring the panic clawing at my throat. The ocean. I tried to recall the ocean. The smell of salt. The taste of brine, the feel of the waves crashing against my skin. It was slipping away, dissolving like sugar in rain, replaced by the acrid scent of rust and something else, something ancient and suffocating. I reached back instinctively and grabbed the cord. A thin, almost invisible strand tethered to the cat's chest, where its heart beat, a frantic, exposed muscle. The cat's heart stuttered, a brief, erratic pause in its relentless thumping. A flicker of something passed through its eyes. Not fear, not anger, but a cold, calculating assessment. It was stealing my memories piece by piece, like a thief in the dark. The drain yawned before me, a black maw promising oblivion. I stumbled forward, the fused metal of my boots scraping against the concrete, the sunlight hammering against my skull, and then he stepped into the light. The shadow, it wasn't a shadow cast in by something, it was something. A three-dimensional distortion, a pocket of absence that warped the air around it. It wasn't clinging to the ground, it was toindy standing, and now it was bathed in the blinding sunlight, and I saw it. A hand, a child's hand. Small, delicate, with fingers that curled and uncurled as if testing the air. It was reaching. My breath hitched. The metallic taste in my mouth intensified, bitter and sharp. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, a strangled gasp. The cat pressed closer, its fur bristling against my neck. The frantic footing thump, thump of its heart a deafening roar in my ears. The sunlight felt heavier now, pressing down on me, suffocating me. The geometry in the air sharpened, the angles becoming more acute, more menacing. I could feel the drain watching me, its darkness seeming to deepen, to coalesce. Fully for less. Uli, it whispered. Not a voice, not really, more like a vibration in the concrete, a resonance in my bones. A memory surfaced, fleeting and fragmented, a woman's voice, soft and melodic, calling my name. My mother! The memory dissolved as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind a hollow ache. The child's hand continued to reach, its fingers twitching, its shadow stretching, consuming. I braced myself, expecting a blow, a touch, something, but it didn't come. Instead, the drain spoke again, louder this time, more insistent. 3, I'm home. The words weren't spoken, they were shoe-felt, a pressure against my skull, a searing brand on my mind. The child's hand paused, hovering just inches from my throat. I could see the details now, the small, perfectly formed fingernails, the delicate veins tracing patterns beneath the skin, the faint scent of something familiar, something lost. The cat's heart hammered against my back, a frantic, desperate plea. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the images away, willing the voice to silence. But it was no use. The geometry in the air intensified, the sunlight blinding, the drain's whisper growing louder, the child's hand closer. I opened my eyes and the world twisted. The concrete walls of the drain seemed to shift and warp, the darkness within pulsing with an unnatural light. The child's hand wasn't a child's hand anymore. It was changing, growing, becoming something else. Something vast and terrible. The cat let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that resonated deep within my chest. It wasn't a warning. It was a lament, a surrender. The cord connecting us tightened, pulling me forward, toward the darkness, toward the voice. I stumbled, my fused boots scraping against the concrete, the metallic tang of fear overwhelming me. I reached out, blindly, desperately, searching for something to hold on to, something to anchor me to reality. My fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. The drain wall, I leaned against it, gasping for breath. The child's hand looming over me. I looked up and saw it, not a face, not a form, but a foreshape. A swirling vortex of darkness, a convergence of angles, a manifestation of the geometry that had consumed the world. And within that shape, I saw something else, a reflection, not of me, but of something older, something Turva. The child's hand descended, not to strike, but to submerge. The fingers intertwined with mine, the coldness seeping into my bones, the darkness consuming my vision. The drain whispered my name again, a final, mournful sigh. Uli, and then the world dissolved. The sunlight, the concrete, the cat, the drain, all vanished, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. I was falling into a void, a place beyond memory, beyond understanding, a place where the geometry reigned supreme, a place where I was no longer Leo Graves. I was something else, something more. A new whisper echoed in the void. Not a question, not a command, but a statement. Hufa, it is ready. The porcelain was slick with something I hadn't noticed before, footy not saliva, but a viscous, metallic sheen. I jammed the upper set into my mouth, forcing the brittle edges against my gums. A searing pain bloomed, quickly followed by a rhythmic, unsettling chatter. Not a clicking, not a grinding, but the sound of paper tearing, wet and insistent. Each tooth vibrated against my tongue, sending tremors up into my skull. The taste of copper flooded my mouth, thick and cloying, masking everything else. I tried to swallow, but the teeth snagged, refusing to be dislodged. A scream built in my chest, a strangled, guttural sound that barely escaped my lips. It felt like a violation, a desecration. But I needed to speak, needed to fill the void, to test the boundaries of this place. Lee, I rasped, the word fractured and distorted by the porcelain. Lee! Lee! The drain answered, not with an echo, but with a resonance, a vibration that traveled through the concrete and into my bones. It wasn't a mechanical response, it was deliberate, a voice, but not a voice. My mother's voice, soft, melodic, tinged with a sadness that felt ancient and profound. "Fee me, sweet boy." The cat's heart pulsed against my back, a frantic drumbeat that seemed to accelerate with each utterance. The cord tethering it to my spine tightened, a subtle but insistent pressure. I could feel it drawing something from me, not blood, not energy, but recollection, fragments of memory dissolving like sugar in rain. My father's face gone. The scent of his pipe tobacco vanished. The warmth of his hand on my shoulder erased. The metal against my skin began to burn. Where the shadow had touched me, a network of silver lines pulsed beneath the surface, spreading like frost. I looked down and saw it, the rusted metal of the drain no longer separate from my flesh. It was slowly becoming part of me, fusing with my skin, weaving itself into the very fabric of my being. The sensation wasn't painful, not exactly. It was invasive, a violation of boundaries, a merging of self and other. The cat was pulling. A steady, relentless tug, dragging me closer to the drain's maw. I dug my heels into the concrete, but it was no use. The fused metal had become an anchor, weighing me down, trapping me in place. The drain's voice grew stronger, more insistent. "Lee, don't you remember?" Remember what? I clawed at the porcelain, desperate to remove it. But it was fused to my gums, a permanent fixture. The chattering intensified. A frantic, maddening rhythm. The world tilted, the concrete walls blurring, the geometry in the air sharpening into impossible angles. A flicker of movement caught my eye, not from the drain but from the wall beside it. A shadow, deeper than the surrounding darkness, began to writhe and coalesce. And then, a hand. Not the amorphous, shifting form I'd seen before, but a hand with distinct features. Small, delicate, with fingers that curled and uncurled, testing the air. It wasn't reaching from the wall, it was emerging from it, dripping rust. The fingers were coated in a viscous, crimson fluid, glistening in the blinding sunlight. It dripped onto the cat's exposed heart, staining the pulsating muscle a dark, ominous shade. The cat didn't flinch, didn't react. It simply continued to pull, its eyes fixed on the drain, its heart beating with a relentless mechanical rhythm. I tried to scream again, but the porcelain teeth muffled the sound, reducing it to a pathetic whimper. The hand extended, reaching for the cat's heart, not to crush it, but to connect, to intertwine. The rust spread, coating the cat's fur, staining its skin, becoming part of its very essence. I could feel the cat's betrayal, not as a conscious thought, but as a shift in its energy. A withdrawal. A severing of the bond that had held us together. It was no longer my friend, my companion. It was a conduit, a vessel. The drain's voice reached a crescendo, a deafening roar that threatened to shatter my skull. "Lee, I'm home." The hand brushed against my cheek, and the world dissolved. Not into darkness, but into a swirling vortex of midnight navy and silver. The geometry of the air became all-encompassing, consuming everything in its path. I was falling, tumbling through an endless void. The cat's heart pulsing in time with the drain's voice. I felt a new sensation, a strange detachment from my own body. The pain was fading, replaced by a sense of expansion. My senses were shifting, becoming attuned to frequencies beyond human perception. I could feel the vibrations of the concrete, the currents of air, the subtle shifts in the Earth's magnetic field. I was no longer Leo Graves, I was becoming something else, something more. The hand tightened its grip, and I understood. It wasn't reaching for the cat. It was reaching for the Twenty May, to pull me into the void, to merge me with the darkness, to make me part of the drain. And then I embraced it. My palm slammed against the concrete, a desperate attempt to anchor myself. The impact did little to halt the pull, but it did something far stranger. A searing heat bloomed on my skin, radiating outward from the point of contact. Not a burn, not precisely. It felt like adhesion. Like the cold, rough surface of the wall was reaching back, welcoming me. Then the metal began to flow. It wasn't a liquid, not in the traditional sense. More like a distortion of reality, the rusted iron of the drain pipes uncoiling, extending, fiber becoming part of me. It started at my palm, tendrils of metal weaving between my skin and muscle, a cold fire spreading up my arm. The sensation wasn't pain, not initially. It was an invasion, a violation of the boundaries between self and other. The metal pulsed, a slow, rhythmic throb that mirrored the frantic beat of the cat's exposed heart. The cord tethering the cat to my spine tightened. A constricting band. I twisted, desperate to dislodge it, to sever the connection. The cat didn't react, its amber eyes fixed on the drain, unblinking. It was a statue carved from shadow and fur, a perfect instrument of whatever was happening. I shoved at it, a clumsy, futile gesture. The cord snapped, not with a clean break, but with a wet, tearing sound, like parchment giving way under pressure. A spray of something viscous, black as oil, splattered across my forearm. It smelled of brine and decay, my vision fractured. The concrete walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with an impossible rhythm. The geometry of the space warped, angles sharpening into impossible configurations. I blinked, trying to regain focus, and saw it, a memory or what was left of one. A flash of blue, the vast, indifferent expanse of the ocean, the crushing weight of water, the blackness, the failure, my dive, the regulator ripped from my mouth, the panic, the desperate struggle for air. The ocean's mouth opening, a gaping maw of darkness promising oblivion. I gasped, choking on the phantom seawater, and the shadow shifted. It wasn't merely thud in the room anymore. It wasn't content to lurk at the periphery of my vision. It was integrating. The darkness seemed to seep into my skin, filling the spaces between my bones, replacing the warmth of my blood with a glacial cold. I could feel it pressing against my ribs, a subtle but insistent pressure. Then a hand, not a phantom limb, not a trick of the light. A hand, solid and real, emerging from the darkness that clung to my chest. The fingers were long and slender, tipped with nails that resembled shards of obsidian. It wasn't reaching for me, it was reaching for me. The hand pressed against my sternum, and the metal accelerated its advance. The burning intensified. But it was a strange, detached sensation, like watching someone else suffer. The silver lines beneath my skin flared, branching out like lightning. The fusion wasn't merely physical, it was cognitive. My thoughts were becoming fragmented, dissolving into a sea of alien sensations. I could feel the drain's presence in my mind, a cold, calculating intelligence probing my memories, dissecting my fears. The scent of grinding coffee beans, acrid and familiar, filled the air. It wasn't coming from anywhere specific. It was straight inside my head, a relentless, maddening rhythm that echoed the pulsing metal, a sound from a life I could no longer fully grasp, a life slipping away. My eyes snapped open, and I saw my reflection in the slick, metallic surface of the drain, or what was left of my reflection. My pupils had dilated, the irises dissolving into a swirling vortex of midnight navy. The color bled into the whites of my eyes, staining them with an unnatural hue. My skin was losing its texture, becoming smooth and metallic, reflecting the dim light like polished steel. The hand tightened its grip, and I understood. It wasn't just merging with my body, it was merging with my Shundi Bing. It wasn't interested in possession, it wanted to become me, to inhabit my consciousness, to rewrite my reality. I felt a strange sense of surrender, a relinquishing of control. The pain had faded, replaced by a profound sense of detachment. I was no longer Leo Graves, the deep-sea diver terrified of the open sky. I was becoming something else, something more, something truer. The hand pressed harder, and the fusion completed. My ribs yielded, the metal seamlessly integrating with bone and flesh. The shadow flowed into the gaps, filling the voids, becoming one with my skeletal structure. The cat's heart pulsed in time with the drain's voice, a relentless mechanical rhythm that resonated through my entire being. I was the drain now. The conduit, the vessel, and the darkness welcomed me home. My hands trembled, not from fear, not precisely, but from a strange internal vibration. The metal still pulsed beneath my skin, a cold, rhythmic insistence that seemed to dictate my movements. I lowered my gaze to the cat. It was adorned. A miniature crown fashioned from rusted drain pipe encircled its head. The metal was rough, jagged, pressing into its fur. It didn't seem to notice. Its heart, exposed and vulnerable, beat against its ribs, a frantic footy thump-thump that echoed the unsettling rhythm within me. I reached for it, a hesitant gesture, wanting to remove the crude circlet. It felt wrong, a violation of the creature's inherent wildness. As my fingers brushed against the cold metal, a sensation bloomed in my mind, a sudden gaping absence, the memory of rain, the smell of wet asphalt after a summer storm, the feeling of cool droplets on my skin, the comforting weight of an umbrella. Gone. A blank space where a sensory experience had once resided. The cat didn't flinch. Its amber eyes, those unsettling pools of shadow, remained fixed on some distant point beyond my comprehension. The grinding of coffee beans intensified, a relentless assault on my senses, a phantom aroma clinging to the back of my throat. It was a taste, too, now twin-bitter and acrid, coating my tongue, a memory stolen, replaced by something else. I stumbled back, the sudden loss disorienting. The walls of the storm drain seemed to shift, the concrete surface rippling like water. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of decay and something else, something floral, sickly sweet. A flash of movement caught my eye. A scattering of porcelain, shards of white and cream, lay strewn across the damp floor. Teeth, small, childlike teeth, shattered on the stone. The sound of paper tearing echoed in the confined space, a relentless, rhythmic ripping that burrowed into my skull. It wasn't a sound I heard with my ears. It was a sensation, a physical pressure against my temples. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block it out, but the tearing persisted, a maddening repetition that seemed to unravel the fabric of my sanity. My reflection in the metallic sheen of the drain cover was wrong. The silver lines beneath my skin pulsed with an unnatural light, tracing patterns I didn't recognize. My eyes, those pools of midnight navy, seemed to deepen, the irises swirling like miniature galaxies. I felt a compulsion to look away, to avert my gaze from the monstrous distortion that was becoming me. The cat blinked, a slow, deliberate movement. Its gaze locked onto mine, and I felt a jolt, a surge of something cold and alien. It wasn't a look of malice, not precisely. It was detached, analytical, as if it were observing an experiment, cataloguing my reactions with clinical precision. A tremor ran through the floor, a low, guttural vibration that resonated in my bones. The shadow, that amorphous darkness that clung to the walls, began to coalesce, to solidify. It wasn't merely a shadow anymore. It was taking form, gaining substance. I could see the edges now, the subtle distortions in the air, the way the light bent around it. The drain cover above us groaned, a metallic screech that pierced the silence. It began to slide, slowly, inexorably, revealing a patch of blinding sunlight. The light felt wrong. It wasn't the warm, comforting glow of a summer afternoon. It was harsh, clinical, revealing hidden geometry in the air, sent angles that shouldn't exist. The cat let out a sound, a low, guttural growl that vibrated in my chest. It wasn't a sound of warning, it was an invitation. The shadow reached, a long, slender tendril of darkness extending from the wall, snaking towards the cat. It wasn't reaching for it. It was reaching for it, and then with a sudden, sickening lurch, the cat was wind-pulled, not violently, not with force, but with a subtle, irresistible magnetism. It vanished into the darkness, swallowed by the shadow, leaving behind only the faint scent of brine and decay. The crown of drain pipe clattered to the floor, a miniature monument to a betrayal I couldn't comprehend. The grinding of coffee beans intensified, a deafening roar in my ears. The tearing of paper reached a fever pitch, a relentless assault on my sanity. The shadow expanded, engulfing the storm drain, blotting out the sunlight. I felt a pressure against my chest, a tightening grip that stole my breath. The last thing I saw, before the darkness consumed me completely, was my reflection in the drain cover. It wasn't my face staring back. It was a mask, a grotesque parody of a human visage, sculpted from metal and shadow. And the eyes were no longer mine. They were the eyes of the drain. I follow the cat into the drain, my boots crunching on shattered porcelain teeth as I step over the threshold. The tunnel swallows me whole, its walls glistening with moisture that reflects the dim light from behind like 1,000 watching eyes. The air grows colder, heavier, each breath tasting of damp earth and decay. The grinding of coffee beans echoes off the concrete, a relentless rhythm that seems to dictate my heartbeat. The tunnel opens into a vast chamber, an underground temple bathed in a midnight navy glow. The walls are lined with figures, motionless, their faces obscured by shadows. As I step closer, the shadows retreat, revealing me. A circle of statues carved in my likeness, each one identical save for subtle variations in stance and expression. It is like looking into an infinity mirror, my reflection repeating ad infinitum. I stand at the center of this grotesque gallery, surrounded by silent sentinels who bear my face but none of its emotions. The cat pads towards them, its heart beating against its furred wall, like a drum roll announcing some morbid performance. Each thump resonates through the chamber, accompanied by whispered harmonics that seem to echo from every corner. Hum Lee. Lee, they murmur in unison, my childhood nickname, twisted into something sinister. The shadow steps out of the circle, detaching itself from the wall where it had been merged with the stone. It is not a creature I can describe. It defies description entirely. It has form but no substance, weight yet no mass. It moves like oil spilled on water flowing towards me, towards the cat. The feline turns to face this dark apparition, its amber eyes reflecting the shadow as if they are two halves of a single entity. The heart beats faster now, a frantic fufty thump, the pre that drowns out even the grinding beans. The sound seems to phase through reality, warping into something else, coffee grounds becoming ground glass under my skin. The cat's heart. It pulses with an unnatural light, like a beacon calling forth the darkness, and then without warning the shadow reaches for it, not with tendrils or claws, but as if drawn by some irresistible force. It touches the exposed organ, and a scream erupts from the cat, not audible but felt, grinding coffee beans reverberating in my bones. The sound is everywhere, filling every crevice of this subterranean cathedral, drowning out thought, reason, sanity itself. It is a sound that consumes all others, leaving behind only silence, and then whispering through the void. The cord was slick with something like oil, thick and warm, the same substance that had seeped from the cat's gums when it smiled. I didn't think. He yanked it. The moment my fingers closed around the thin strand, it unraveled like thread pulled from a spool, each twist revealing a dark, glistening core that pulsed in time with the cat's frantic thump. The heart didn't slow. It didn't even hesitate. It stretched, elongating itself between us like a taut wire, the membrane over its surface shimmering with the same navy sheen as the chamber walls. The cat's eyes locked onto mine, ember endless, drowning, and for a second I swear I saw my own reflection staring back, but not from the mirror, not from the statues, but from Thuli's side, the cat's pupils. Then the moment snapped, and the cord went slack, dissolving into the air like smoke given form. The cat's body went rigid, its spine arched, not in pain but in frippery, and then it twisted, not toward me but toward the altar. The mirror there was a slab of black glass, its surface so smooth it drank the light. But when the cat's clawed paw pressed against it, the reflection moved, not the cat's image, no, the shadows. It had been lurking at the edge of the frame, a smudge of absence, but now it stepped forward, and the glass warped to accommodate it, bending like liquid but never breaking, not until the cat's voice, if it even had a voice, hissed in my skull, a sound like tearing paper. And the words formed in the steam, rising from the altar's surface, crawling across the mirror in jagged silver script. Hoot waiting. Hooch. Oh, it's waiting. Oh, I didn't need to be told twice. The porcelain teeth lay scattered at my feet, their edges still sharp despite the years, the way broken things stay sharp when they've been waiting. I grabbed a handful, their coldness biting into my palm, and hurled them at the mirror. The first one struck true, shattery, and the sound wasn't just glass. It was soy teeth. A chorus of porcelain jaws, snapping shut in the dark, a wet, ragged chatter that vibrated through my ribs. The second, the third. The mirror fwepty, not water, not blood. Something thicker, darker, the consistency of tar, but the color of rust, oozing from the fractures like a living thing trying to escape. The cat's tail lashed, its tip brushing against the altar, and the steam screamed, the words twisting into something else. You left me. The shadow she reached through the glass. Not a hand, not a limb. It was quivering, a mass of shifting angles that shouldn't fit together but did, like a puzzle solved by a child who'd never seen the box. Its fingers, if they could be called that, were long, too many joints, each one bending in directions that made my eyes ache just to look at them. And when it touched the glass, the rust fin melted into its skin, seeping into the gaps between its bones like ink in water. The mirror Thor screamed again, and this time the sound was circumcised, my head a wet, tearing noise that made my teeth ache. Then the glass twin gave, not all at once, not with a crash. It unzipped. A straight line from top to bottom, and the shadow stepped through 40, and the hand it brought with it was 100 rusty, flaking off in scales that hit the stone with the sound of wet paper being torn. The fingers curled around the altar's edge, and the cat's back arched higher, its mouth open, its heart beating so fast I could twin to feel. It in my own chest, a frantic for the thump, thump, that drowned out everything else. The shadow turned its head, if it had a head, and looked at me, and for the first time I saw flint what it was said. Not a face, not a shape. It was soindy, obscurdy, a vondy void with edges, and those edges were thwin teeth. Not porcelain, not human, but something in between, jagged and black and hungry. It opened its mouth, and the sound that came out wasn't a voice. It was the grinding of coffee beans, but not the dry mechanical sound from the tunnel. This was Tondwet Twenflish the sound of something being chewed from the inside out. The cat's heart twin stopped. Not suddenly, not suddenly. It unraveled. The chord snapping like a guitar string, and the organ itself tunburst of. Not in a spray of blood, but in a shower of tun silver, tiny fragments that caught the light and fell like rain. The cat didn't scream, it didn't even twitch. It just tiffy collapsed, and the shadow fooey laughed, and the sound was the tearing of paper, and the words in the steam changed, now you're next. The stone bit into the soles of my feet, each impact a dull ache that barely registered. I ran, not toward anything, but toward away from the thing that had stepped through the mirror, away from the scattered silver fragments of the cat's heart, away from the wet, tearing sound that still echoed in the hollows of my skull. Each stride sent a spray of dust motes, dancing in the blinding light that filtered down from the unseen opening above. It wasn't a natural light. It lacked warmth, possessing instead a clinical dissecting quality that revealed every imperfection in the temple's architecture. The hairline fractures in the stone, the patches of rust blooming like mold, the impossible geometry of the angles. Behind me, the sound of stone cracking followed. Not a collapse, but a deliberate, measured breaking, as if each footfall of the shadow was reshaping the temple to its liking. It wasn't gaining on me, not exactly. It was foodie adjusting its distance, maintaining a constant, unnerving proximity. The air tasted like copper, a metallic tang that coated my tongue and made the back of my throat constrict. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The shadow wasn't running. It was sooty unfolding, extending limbs that weren't quite limbs, angles that shouldn't exist, a shifting kaleidoscope of darkness that devoured the light. The cat lay still, a broken porcelain doll amidst the silver rain. Its heart, or what remained of it, pulsed weakly, a pathetic fading rhythm. A desperate idea clawed its way to the surface. I veered sharply, ignoring the protest of my muscles, and kicked at the severed cord, sending it snaking towards the pursuing shadow. It struck true, wrapping around one of its appendages. The effect wasn't what I expected. The shadow didn't stumble in pain. It fallistated, its form momentarily glitching like a corrupted file struggling to render. A flicker, a distortion, and then it righted itself. But the brief interruption was enough. I seized a handful of the shattered porcelain teeth, their edges still cruelly sharp. Each fragment felt slick, coated in the same oily residue that had stained the cat's gums. I hurled them, not with aim, but with fury, with the desperate hope that to something would stick. One struck the shadow's face 2 foot, or where its face should be swarty, and the impact wasn't a shatter of porcelain. It was a fushand. The white of the tooth seemed to melt into the darkness, the two materials bonding with a sickening squelch, like flesh knitting over rusted metal. A new sound joined the chorus, a wet, grinding noise, the sound of bone against corroded iron. The shadow recoiled, a ripple of distortion running through its form. I kept throwing, each shard finding its mark, each impact adding to the grotesque mosaic of porcelain and rust. The shadow's movements became more erratic, its unfolding gait stuttering, its angles twisting in unnatural ways. It was slowing, but not stopping. It was scruffy-tapping. The grinding sound intensified, becoming a low, guttural moan that resonated deep within my chest. Then it reached for me. Not with a hand, not with a claw, but with a distortion of space, a warping of reality. The gesture wasn't aimed for my eyes, it was aimed for them. A pressure built, a crushing weight behind my eyelids, and a searing pain bloomed in the darkness. I squeezed them shut, but it didn't help. The pressure intensified, and I felt something cold, something wrong pressing against my sockets. It wasn't a physical touch, it was a physical taking, a draining. The world dissolved into a swirling vortex of navy and silver, and the last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me entirely was the shadow's face, an absence-given form, a void filled with jagged black teeth, and the sickening realization that it wasn't interested in destroying my eyes. It wanted to shy where the temple air tastes like old pennies and crushed glass. I stand blind, but the absence isn't empty. It's too full. The shadow steps into my skin, not through it, but to along it, like water seeping into stone. A cold pressure, not painful but too inescapable, spreads from my temples down my spine. It's not fear I feel. Not anymore. It's the deep, slow pull of water in a deep-sea trench, a hunger that makes my bones hum with resonance. My hands are no longer mine. They are rust-slicked. Midnight navy, the color of the void beneath the ocean's surface where light dies. I feel the texture of the rust. Gritty like dried blood under fingernails, yet smooth as river stone. It's part of me now, a second skin grown from the shadow's touch. The porcelain teeth chatter in the corner. Not a sound I hear, but a vibration I feel. In my molars, a high-pitched tremor against the back of my skull. Each tiny shard of the cat's broken smile rattles against the stone floor, a relentless tiny drumbeat. The sound is the sound of coffee beans grinding in a forgotten mill, wet and slow, each grind a tiny fracture in the air. I watch the silver fragments of the cat's heart, its external, pulsing organ grind against the stone, not a heartbeat but a grind. The rhythmic shush, shush, shush-shust of the heart against the floor. The sound of 1,000 tiny teeth scraping stone fills the temple's hollows. It's the only sound besides the slow, wet sigh of the storm drain beneath my feet, a sound like a deep breath drawn through a choked throat. The cat lies still, its external heart a pale, broken thing, grinding its own rhythm into the stone. I don't look at it, I look through it. My new sight sees the geometry of the temple's air, the impossible angles made visible by the blinding light. Dust motes hang suspended, not drifting, but drifting frozen in the air, each one a tiny prism catching the clinical light. The silver fragments of the cat's heart reflect the light, casting fractured dancing points of silver onto the stone walls. They look like scattered stars, or perhaps the tears of the temple itself. I step toward the drain, not with hesitation, but with the calm certainty of a deep-sea diver settling into a familiar trench. The fear of the open sky. Veer has dissolved like salt in water. There's no sky here. Only the temple, the drain, the grinding heart, the whispering teeth. My rusted hands brush the cold stone floor. The texture is familiar, like the smooth, wet rock of the ocean floor I once navigated. The shadow's hunger is water, and I am the vessel. I am becoming the current. The drain's opening is a dark oval in the stone, a wound in the temple's floor. It sighs, a low, wet sound like the drain's throat closing. I step closer. My rusted feet make no sound on the stone, only a faint, metallic whistle. Where the rust meets the cool surface. The grinding of the cat's heart intensifies. A frantic, grinding fush-shush, shush, that matches the frantic pulse of the drain's sigh. The teeth chatter louder, a higher-pitched tink that vibrates the air. The silver fragments of the heart catch the light, throwing tiny stabbing points of silver that feel like needles in my eyes I no longer see with. I step toward the drain. The shadow's presence is no longer thought outside. Me, it's the fabric of my being. I feel its weight, its deep, slow hunger, the water it craves. The drain sighs again. A deeper, wetter sound. The opening narrows. The sound of the grinding heart and the teeth chatter reaches a crescendo, a frantic, overlapping rhythm. The silver fragments pulse with a final, weak light. Then the drain closes. Not with a slam, but with a slow, wet twish-shush, like a lid sealing over a deep, dark well. The sound is final, absolute. The grinding heart stops. The teeth chatter ceases. Only the wet sigh of the closed drain remains, a soft final breath. And then, the whisper. It comes from the drain, but it's not the drain speaking. It's the shadow, now wearing my face. I feel its presence in the new, rusted skin of my own face. The way the shadow's hunger now fills the space where my own features should be. The whisper is soft, intimate, a sound like the drain's sigh turned to breath. It's a sound I've heard before, in childhood, in the dark, a voice that knew my secret name. It says, clear as the grinding of coffee beans in the corner, Lee, we're home. The words are not heard. They are felt, vibrating through the rusted skin of my face, through the stone floor, through the closed drain. The temple is silent. The only sound is the deep, slow sigh of the drain, and the echo of the whisper in the rusted hollow of my new skin. I am home! I am the drain! I am the grinding heart! I am the shadow wearing the face. The temple holds its breath, waiting for the next step, the next sigh.